All right, let's jump right in. Imagine for a second that we're stepping onto a giant construction site, one that's been in the works for thousands of years, all across the globe. This is our world, and it was built by some pretty extraordinary individuals. So in this explainer, we're going to take a look at their blueprints.
You know, it's a totally fair question. With everything going on in our own lives and our own world, why should we spend any time thinking about people who lived centuries or even millennia ago? It might seem obvious, but the real answer, the deep answer, connects directly to the life you're living today.
And honestly, the historian David McCullough just nails it with this quote. History isn't just some dusty old book full of dates and names. It's the story of us. It's our origin story. And you can't really understand the why of today without understanding the people who laid the groundwork.
So, to really get a grip on this, let's run with a metaphor here. I want you to think of these major historical figures, not just as people who lived a long time ago, but as the master planners, the lead engineers, the architects of our world.
This is our key phrase for today, architects of history. And the most important word there is actively. These people weren't just passively watching things happen. No, they were in the thick of it, designing, building, and shaping the very foundations of law, philosophy, and society that we're still dealing with, often without even realizing it.
But here's the thing. When we hear these huge names, Alexander the Great, Cleopatra, Confucius, it's so easy to just see the monument, the big, shiny label. So the really important question becomes, who were they as people?
It's all about getting past that larger-than-life reputation to connect with what one of our sources calls the messy human package. I love that phrase. It's perfect because it reminds us that these weren't marble statues. They were complicated, living, breathing people.
And this is how we do it. We can dig into their ambitions, their motivations. What was it that really drove them? We can look at their flaws and their failures because, let's be honest, that's often where the best lessons are. We try to piece together their relationships and imagine what their inner worlds were like. And in all of that, we start to see little reflections of ourselves.
Okay, so how on earth do we actually do that? How do we investigate lives from so long ago? Well, it's not just about making stuff up. It has to be grounded in evidence. And the whole process, really, it looks a lot like detective work. So these detectives, the historians, they're working with two main types of clues. You've got your primary sources. Think of the actual chunk of stone that Hammurabi carved his famous legal code into almost 4,000 years ago. That's a primary source. It's from the time. Then you have secondary sources, like a book written last year by a scholar analyzing what that code tells us about their society. You absolutely need both to solve the puzzle.
And this reveals the real toolkit for a historian, critical thinking. It means you're piecing together clues that are often broken or incomplete. You're cross-referencing different accounts that might totally contradict each other. And you are constantly asking, who made this and why? A historian doesn't just read Hammurabi's code. They ask, who is this written for? And maybe the most fascinating part, they listen for the silences, what's not being said, what laws aren't in the code. What does that tell us?
So, after all that digging, what does this detective work actually uncover? Well, it brings us right back to our main point, why any of this matters to us now. The things these architects did, the ideas they had, they created ripples, long-term consequences that are still washing up on our shores today.
Now, some of those foundations they built are tangible. You can see them, you can touch them. That physical slab of rock with Hammurabi's code that now sits in the Louvre, that's a tangible structure. It's physical proof of his desire to make law permanent and public.
But, and this is the really powerful part, the stone itself is way less important than the intangible structure it represents. That's the revolutionary idea that laws should be written down, consistent, and available for everyone to see. That's a structure made of thought, and it outlasted every single empire.
And this is what we call cascading effects. An idea like Hammurabi's written law doesn't just stay put in ancient Babylon. Oh no. It cascades through history, influencing legal traditions in Rome, then in Europe, and eventually becoming part of the DNA of legal systems all over the world, including ours.
Now, we have to pause here because this is critically important. We can't just put these figures on a pedestal. The word architect doesn't automatically mean good architect. We have to ask a really tough but absolutely essential question.
This right here is non-negotiable. Real history is about critical understanding, not hero worship. Sure, Hammurabi's code was foundational, but it also laid out some pretty brutal punishments and locked in a social hierarchy where a nobleman's life was worth more than a commoner's. Understanding the good and the bad, that's the whole point.
So, when we study these ancient lives, with all their complexity,
The good, the bad, the brilliant, the messy. What we're really doing is holding up an ancient mirror. We're using it to see our own world and even ourselves a little bit more clearly.
So what do we see in that mirror? Well, it gives us some much-needed long-term perspective. It helps us analyze power and leadership right now. It builds empathy by forcing us to try and see the world through someone else's eyes. And maybe most importantly, it shows us that the way our world is today wasn't inevitable. It was built. And that means individuals have agency. Their choices mattered then, and our choices matter now.
If you take away just one thing, let it be this. The past isn't some far-off, disconnected place. It's the literal ground beneath our feet. The choices and ideas of these architects of history formed the foundation that we are all standing on at this very moment.
And so we end by turning that ancient mirror back on you. It's a huge question, I know, but it's one worth thinking about. In your own life, your work, your community, what foundations are you building for the future? Thanks for joining this explainer.